Welcome to r/Malicious Compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. When a new colleague tried to impose impractical rules, the field staff decided to meticulously document and bag all items, even trash. The second story. Tax compliance check at a local market takes an unexpected turn when an uncooperative stallholder demands a formal letter, resulting in a substantial tax bill. The third story. Remote call center agent enforces strict schedule adherence by maliciously complying with the absence of scheduled breaks, forcing management to rethink their policy. The first story is, we aren't experts? Okay then. The usual disclaimers apply. Native English speaker writing from a mobile device. If you find any spelling or grammatical errors, please feel free to adopt them. I would suggest keeping them away from water and not feeding them after midnight to avoid them multiplying uncontrollably. I work in the heritage sector, providing specialist services to the construction industry ahead of developments as required by law. This story takes place a few years ago when my company had been contracted to carry out work ahead of a large infrastructure project. To give you an idea of scale, this project provided most of the work for my company for the better part of 4.5 years. The typical process for our work would be that we would come in several months or years before actual construction was due to start. We would then excavate trenches, dig any features that came up, photograph them, draw them, measure them, and fill out endless stacks of paperwork about a single nondescript furrow in an entire field full of identical nondescript furrows. We would also send any artifacts back to the office to be dealt with. Artifacts in this case usually means random bits of broken pot, pieces of flint, rarely a piece of metalwork, usually a piece of broken horseshoe. Eventually, these artifacts would be cleaned, weighed, and reviewed by specialists who would write even more paperwork detailing various aspects about them. This would be combined with the paperwork and drawings we had completed on site, and in the fullness of time, a final report would be written for the site and sent to the client. These artifacts, or fines as we usually call them, when returned to the office are initially dealt with by the imaginatively named fines department. They're responsible for the initial cataloging and cleaning before they're sent on to the specialists. At the time in question, the head of the fines department was away on maternity leave, and so a temporary replacement had been hired. Let us call her Alice. Alice had not long come out of university with their shiny new master's degree in fines conservation, or something similar. She was also determined to make her mark on the company so that we would extend her contract once her predecessor returned from maternity leave. Seeing an opportunity, she arranged to visit each site in turn to deliver a short lecture to introduce herself, outline any changes to policies, refresh people's memories on existing policies, and gather feedback on the current and proposed policies. At least this is what should have happened. I'm unfortunately unable to give a verbatim account of the conversation as I was off work myself during the meeting. My colleagues have described it in some detail, though, when they brought me up to speed on the changes to policy when I returned the next Monday. The meeting was badly timed for the site I was working on. It was a Wednesday, and the weather forecast for the rest of the week was rain, with quite a lot of work left to do to meet our quota. We work outside with heavy machinery and have to hand dig a lot. Not only is rain unpleasant to work in, it's also more dangerous due to the risk of slipping in mud or the material you're digging being waterlogged and much heavier. In extreme cases, it can even conceal trip hazards and holes large enough to fall in. This has happened to staff members several times over the years, including myself. Bearing this in mind, and the fact that the meeting was called during lunch, none of my colleagues were in a particularly convivial mood. Dave, the site supervisor, was distracted during the meeting, trying to work out how to do 3 days' worth of work in half a day, and so wasn't really paying much attention to what Alice was saying. Alice, for her part, was generally complaining about the poor standard of labeling on material being sent back, the fact that things were covered in mud when they were sent back, and that we were writing things on the bags that they would use. Stuff like upper gray fill. Useless to them, but very useful to the person halfway through digging the feature when they're trying to remember what bag to put something in. The conversation then turned to how she wanted us to all use fines trays. Think lightweight flat plastic trays, like you might get at a garden center, to store fines next to our features rather than bagging them straight away. It was of course pointed out that this was a bloody stupid idea, on the basis that a thin flimsy piece of plastic to neatly arrange things on might look good when management or TV crews were around, but in reality the first time there was a gust of wind, all of those fines would be scattered across the field. It was also pointed out that they would probably all be broken inside a week, on account of how flimsy they actually were. Alice duly noted these concerns and immediately dismissed them. My friend then asked how exactly she was expecting them to carry a toolbox, shovel, mattock, pickaxe-like tool, camera, photograph scales, and these fines trays out to their feature, which could be up to 20 minutes walk from the welfare unit. The response was, "If you need it, you will find a way to carry it." It was at this point that Dave realized the meeting wasn't going quite as smoothly as it should have and started paying attention again, just in time to hear from my friend respond, "Well, we don't need them, so we won't bother." Alice didn't take this too well, but the meeting continued and the topic turned to fine selection. It's worth mentioning at this point that each project we work out has a lengthy document, which outlines the various requirements and processes for the different aspects. One of the things included in this is always the selection criteria for what fines are returned to the office for processing. Typically, it will include a section which permits site staff to discard modern material without recording, and to record and discard some other types of fines on site at the direction of the site director. As part of the meeting, the topic of discarding fines was brought up. I'm not sure exactly why it was brought up. I believe one of my colleagues may have inquired as to clarify the precise parameters for when to discard certain objects. Alice was furious. She began shouting at my colleagues, accusing them of theft, and that she was to inform the police if she ever thought that they were not properly recovering fines and have us fired. That we had no idea what we were doing, and that you're not experts. It's not up to you to decide what is of archaeological significance. Leaving aside the fact that about 95% of our job is deciding precisely that, Dave stepped in at this point and the meeting was swiftly brought to a conclusion, with Alice leaving to inflict her presence on another one of our sites a few miles away. I returned the next Monday and was given a rundown on what had happened, along with a blow-by-blow account of the meeting and the precise wording out our new instructions. We aren't experts? It's not up to us to decide what's archaeological and what isn't? Okay then, we can work with that. What Alice had not realized is that there are a lot of things that we discard as having no archaeological significance. Digging a trench in a field, the topsoil is usually full of modern rubbish which we would ignore. Not this time. Empty Coke can? Bagged. Piece of bird's eye char-grilled chicken wrapper? Bagged. Broken beer bottle? Bagged. By the end of the first day, we had filled several large bags full of fines. By the end of the week, they had to use a bin bag to transport them all to the office. This continued for several weeks. Alice unable to bring herself to admit that she had been wrong, and apologized, and us perfectly happy to follow our new orders to the letter. About a month afterward, though, there was a slight change. Previously, all fines would be taken to our office, processed, and then sent to head office to be looked at by the specialists. Now, to save time and money, they were going to send all the fines directly to head office to be processed there. The next week, we get a phone call from the head of fines in the company, Alice's manager. It went something along the lines of, Alice's manager: "Are you staff a bunch of idiots?" Dave: "No." Alice's manager: "Then why the hell are they sending us bags of literal rubbish?" Dave: "Because they were told to." Alice's manager: "What?" Dave recounts meeting with Alice. Alice's manager: "Oh, for God's sake, just tell them to go back to doing it properly. I'll deal with Alice." We went back to doing our job properly, somewhat sadly as we had been quite enjoying ourselves. Alice had to have a meeting with her boss, who made it very clear that the people who didn't know what they were doing had over 30 years of experience between them, and the least experienced among them had several times the field experience Alice did. Alice was also prohibited from issuing such instructions to people again without approval from her manager. When it came time for the original head of fines to return from materiality leave, people were practically cheering. She had been concerned that Alice would have successfully integrated herself to the extent that people would not have appreciated the disruption of her return. People had in fact been counting the days until she returned, as Alice had, in addition to alienating most of the field staff, also failed to make friends within the office staff. Alice was retained, but was demoted to an assistant to help manage the workload, and moved on a couple of years later without having been allowed to cause too much trouble again. The second story is, you want an official letter? I'll send you an official letter. I worked for my country's tax office, think IRS, Internal Revenue, for a number of years. One year, my office decided to conduct a compliance check into stall holders at a very popular local market. There are over 300 stalls, so what we want to do is check very quickly the name of the stall holder, if they're registered for any sort of tax, and if they need any help with tax. Don't laugh. We start at one end of the market and move on. By the time we've done the first few stalls, half a dozen stall holders have left. Shock horror, but generally people are cool with what we're doing. I get to one stall where the stall holder is selling handmade artwork. I walk up to him and he immediately starts complaining that I'm disrupting his business, and I'm not entitled to do what I'm doing. There are no customers at his stall. He says that he's not going to answer my questions, and that he'll only answer my questions if I send him a formal notice. I show him my warrant, which entitles me to ask him the questions I'm asking, but no, he wants an argument. I take enough information so I can send him an official letter and move on. The next stall is very popular. I wait for the stall holder to look after 5 customers, and then take the information I need. He's easy with it all. I look back at the other stall holder, still hasn't had a customer. I move on. When I get back to the office, I send out the formal letter. Since it's formal, I ask for everything. Instead of the simple check I wanted to do at the market, I run a full audit in the course of which I can find that he has failed to declare income and claim deductions he shouldn't have. All up, he got a bill for over $10,000 just because he didn't want to answer a few simple questions. The third story is, don't want to give me my break? Okay, I'll take an hour of free pay. For context, I work a fully remote work-from-home job. It's just as a call center agent, and it's actually really nice, because it gives me flexibility with schooling and my commute to work is getting out of bed. Anyways, we use an online scheduler where the company sets our schedules and we adhere to it. Our adapter is what tracks our adherence to codes like break, lunch, meeting, etc. How well we adhere to the schedule is recorded by a metric score, and we actually receive bonuses and stuff at the end of the month if other metrics are also high. Last week I had an issue with my schedule where they just randomly changed my lunchtime. My lunch was at half an hour past noon, and I had timestamps to prove that I had even checked my schedule 20 minutes prior to my lunch because my girlfriend wanted to go get lunch. In that 20-minute period, they changed my lunch to 2:30, leaving me out of adherence for lunch. I reached out to my manager and told her that wasn't right, but she told me unfortunately I would have to be out of adherence. Okay, fine, whatever. I'll just make sure I check it before I go on breaks or lunch. Annoying, but not a huge deal, as adherence is an average and thus one day won't hurt anything. Today I logged on and saw that I didn't have my second break. We get 2 15-minute breaks that are paid. It's actually really nice because when you're sitting at a PC for long shifts, it's really nice to get up and stretch and grab some water. I messaged her and asked her why it wasn't. She responded, if your break isn't there, you don't get one. I was very annoyed by this because at the beginning of employment, we were basically told if we weren't assigned breaks, that it should be fixed as it's company policy that every employee gets those breaks. I just said okay and moved on. Cue the malicious compliance. We had training slotted for this afternoon that was an hour ago, but I had already completed the training as I just took the time to do it during slow hour. I could have told her and remained on the phones, but no. If I have to adhere to the schedule, I will adhere. I set my status to training and ate lunch and played with my kitties. When I got back, she knew I had been gone because when I walk away from my PC, I lock it. Sensitive information access, just a practice I learned from cybersecurity work, and because of that, my status goes offline. She asked me why I didn't do my training, and I said I already did it. She then asked why I didn't remain on the line. At that point, I said, if you expect me to give up my breaks and maintain perfect adherence, you can't expect me to not set my status to training. I gave up my break, so I'm also going to remain in that status so that I have perfect adherence for today. At that point, she remained silent and said, you'll have your breaks from now on. Edit. No one should be expected to keep long, tiring focus in any capacity, whether that be school or work. I've always disliked it when professors or employers made my life harder because they saw fit, so I take any chance I can to MC when it's warranted. It's honestly one of the best jobs I've ever worked, and apart from the break issues, I've loved it. It's a very intense job but can be rewarded. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button.